Welcome to Scriptural Focus. I'm Jack Wilkie. Grab your Bible, let's dig in. Welcome back to Scriptural Focus. This time we're going to talk about some questions about heaven and what we're going to look like and things like that. Of course, one that comes up a lot is, will we recognize each other in heaven? And one of the citations you often get with things like that is pointing back to the Old Testament of when Saul has Samuel called up by the medium, when you also have the transfiguration of Moses and Elijah, and of course they were recognizable. There is the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, and the rich man seems to recognize Lazarus. And so those would all indicate yes. On the other hand, there is a slight difference depending on your reading of how all of this processed of those pre the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ, and then also how things are going to change in the final eternity and whether those things continue. But when we see people who are no longer alive on this earth but are still recognizable in some sense, it does seem to lend itself to the idea that we will recognize one another in heaven. And so you've got scriptural indication on that. This is not scriptural, but something I think has been helpful is when C.S. Lewis writes about the idea of marriage in heaven, and of course Jesus says that they don't marry and are given in marriage in heaven, but this idea that in heaven we're going to be closer to everybody who's there in some sense than we are to even the closest people we are here on earth, because it is that experience in which all selfishness has been pulled out, all of our earthly concerns have been pulled away, and it's all Christ, all love, all God's presence all the time. And that's a really wonderful thought, I think. And so even among those we don't recognize, there will be that closeness, but still we long to be reunited with those that have gone ahead of us, with a beloved parent or grandparent or spouse or child or whatever it may be. And you think also of David when he lost the son with Bathsheba, and he doesn't take much of the time for mourning, and his servants ask, well, why were you so in mourning before the baby died but not now? And he says, well, I prayed while he might be saved, but now that he's gone, he can't come back, but I can go to him. And so he had full expectation that he will see him again, and so I think we can learn from that. As far as what that will look like, that opens up a whole other can of worms of if we'll have bodies, if we will not. I take very literally the verses like Philippians 3:21 that say that we will be united or in the likeness of Jesus' glorified body. Well, we saw Jesus' glorified body, or at least man did, the apostles did, after the resurrection. It was that glorified body that teleported through walls, that just did some incredible things that he did not do before the resurrection. And so when it says we'll have a body with the likeness of his glorified body, number one, it was recognizable. But on the other hand, at other times it was obscured. It was a very mysterious thing that we don't get a lot of indication from about what it means, and I think that's for a reason. And so there is that consideration to it, as well as physical or spiritual, what you think it will be. I do believe it will be a physical resurrection or physically resurrected body, and what happens after that, there's a whole lot of interpretation and debate over that I'm not going to get into in this video. Having said that, there are other questions with it as well. One of the things I want to dispel, and I believe most here probably read enough, familiar enough to know, but I'm just going to put it out there just in case. So many times you hear, heaven gained another angel today. We do not become angels. When Jesus said that they are like angels in heaven, he's speaking about that the angels neither married nor given in marriage. And so we don't in heaven marry or are given in marriage. But that doesn't mean that we become angels. The angels were created before us. They are God's servants. They operate separate to us throughout the scriptures. And it says the angels will serve us. We will judge the angels. So no, we don't become angels. Another question that somebody in workshopping this, putting out some feelers for questions, somebody threw at me, maybe jokingly, I'm not sure, but I'll roll it in since we're on the topic of heaven. Do all dogs go to heaven? Well, we have our pets with us in heaven. Some point to Psalm 36:6 that says, your righteousness is like the mountains of God, your judgments are like a great deep. O Lord, you preserve or save, depending on your translation, man and beast. That's a really big leap to make from a psalm that is poetic, and so the idea of the salvation of the creatures. However, again, on a whole other can of worms as to what the resurrection life will look like, There is a world in which some would interpret it to say that animals will be there. That doesn't mean that every animal that ever lived will be resurrected, but that in some form, God will restore the beauty of His creation, the things that He said were good. Others would look at that and say, no, that's ridiculous. That's not going to happen. I'm not taking a side on that one because I don't know. I'm not a dog person. That's the nice thing. I'm not a pet person much at all. My daughter is very disappointed in that. But as to the answer of whether there will be dogs in heaven, there are way too many theological underpinnings to answer as to why somebody would think they are or they aren't. And so we're not going to get into that. Will we recognize our loved ones in heaven? Absolutely. Will we be angels in heaven? No, we will not. Will dogs go to heaven? I'm not answering that. Will we work in heaven, or will I think one of the concepts that a lot of people have is it is an eternal 24/7 worship service, and some people think that sounds pretty boring, like it might get old, and then they feel bad for thinking that. Of why it's not that I don't want to worship God. It's I don't see any indication that it'll be a 24/7 worship service. When you look in the book of Revelation, there is worship before the throne of God day and night, absolutely. But there's also this indication of that's currently what's going on, but we're also moving towards a greater end where things change ultimately. We're there in the city of God with the tree of life, and He is our daylight, and that scene that you see early on in Revelation isn't there at the very end, I guess is what I'm getting at. So there's one more question to tack onto it. There's a lot of questions about heaven. A lot of them I just can't answer because I haven't been there, I haven't seen it, and God is reserving those things for us, which I think is a wonderful thing, is to give us enough of a hint to say it's going to be unbelievable for all of eternity, and you don't get to know it right now because, as John kind of indicates with the measurements and the jewels and all the beauty of the city he describes, it's not really something we could get our minds around even if we did have the description. And so we have to have faith in that. We can kind of have the curiosities about some of these issues, but beyond that, we can only speculate to a certain degree. And so if there are any follow-up questions or, as always, any other questions you want covered on Scriptural Focus, be sure to submit them in the comments below, and we'll talk to you next week.